Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. With self-care strategies from Chinese medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, neuroscience, and beyond. I'm your host, Brody Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and transformation catalyst, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Hello, and thanks for tuning in today. Before we jump into the show, I wanted to make sure that you knew that doors are now open for my Level Up Your Life course that starts in January, and now is the time to get in on it. This is my course that helps people upgrade their daily habits in the direction of health and happiness. And to give you a sense of what the course is like, I would like to read an email that I got after the last round ended. It says, I'm just choosing little excerpts here, but the course felt like a treasure chest of jewels. I can't wait to review all the material and get into some of the things that I felt like I skimmed the first time around. The best gift was you. You're a healer in every sense, and healing is what happened. I know why people take this course multiple times. Once you experience a path towards healing, you just want to keep going. Duh. There are so many tools that you offered us to heal with, and so many parts that need to be healed. In all seriousness, thank you, Brody. Saying it was a pleasure or helpful or inspiring just doesn't cover it, although it's all of those things too. We need a new word for what you were doing. There probably is a word. Anyway, I don't have the word, but it's something like a rhapsody of good things. Thank you. I can't wait to work with you again. This has changed my trajectory. So my question to you is, what kind of trajectory change do you want to see in your life? Is it about feeling more calm and confident and less stressed on a regular basis? Are you wanting to feel lighter, clearer, and more comfortable in your body? Are you wanting to just feel like you're at the center of your own life and that you have the right to prioritize the things that you know you need to do for yourself? This group is an incubator for taking the risks that it requires to show up differently in the world and to really be prioritizing the things that we need to do to feel amazing. So check it out over at brodywelch.com/level-up. So even though we don't get rolling till January, the time to act is now. And there is a deep discount for early birds. So head to brodywelch.com, find the Level Up page, and apply. And now for today's episode. Welcome to today's show. I'm super excited for today's interview, because not only is it a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is anxiety and what we can do about it with our diet and lifestyle, but also because the guest herself is just a lovely human being who I really appreciate and respect. Food mood expert Trudy Scott is a certified nutritionist who educates anxious individuals about nutritional solutions for anxiety, and she is known worldwide for her use of targeted individual amino acids, which offer hope and immediate relief from anxiety so that underlying root causes and dietary changes can be addressed with ease. She also educates about nutritional solutions for social anxiety, the condition called pyroluria, and the harmful effects of benzodiazepines. She's the author of The Anti-Anxiety Food Solution: How the Foods You Eat Can Help You Calm Your Anxious Mind, Improve Your Mood, and End Cravings. And she hosts the Anxiety Summit, which is an online educational platform for both consumers and health professionals. And season 5 has to do with the gut-brain axis, and it's just right around the corner, November 11th through 17th. So if you're listening in real time, you're going to want to get signed up for the Anxiety Summit 5, which is at theanxietysummit5.com. Links will be in the show notes. Trudy is an experienced practitioner. She knows her stuff. And as I mentioned, she's just a delight to talk to. So Trudy, welcome to A Healthy Curiosity. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Brody. It's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you for that lovely introduction. It's so nice.
And it is heartfelt. Let's start with your story and why you came to do the work that you do with anxiety.
I got into this because of my own anxiety. In my late 30s, I was working in a very hectic corporate job and was majorly stressed out and working very long hours and going through perimenopause. And I just started to get increasingly anxious. And I had panic attacks and I had terrible, terrible hormonal imbalances. I was a wreck for 3 weeks out of every month. And in that 1 week where I felt good, I just read every single book that I could get my hands on. And I tried to learn about what was going on with my body because it seemed to come out of the blue, but it was actually, well, in retrospect, I look back and it was a culmination of many different things. It was the increasing stress and the cortisol levels going through the roof. I discovered I had gluten issues. I was actually eating a vegetarian diet at the time, which was not working for me. I had found out that I had this mouthful of fillings, and I had mercury toxicity and high lead levels, and I had this genetic condition called pyroluria. I was prone to low GABA and low serotonin. So I had all of these things that I call this perfect storm that was causing this anxiety, and it had been building, and I was kind of ignoring it. And that's what we do often as women. We sort of push through and we deal with it and we ignore it, and then it sort of came to its ugly head. And I worked with a wonderful naturopath and started to connect the dots on how important food was and biochemistry was and toxins and, reducing stress and all of these things that we can do that can actually completely turn around anxiety and panic attacks. And it was so amazing to make this connection. And it was my thinking had always been along those lines. I knew, I'd gone to the doctor and they did a brain scan because I couldn't think anymore, and I was offered antidepressants, and I said, no, I don't need medication. I grew up in South Africa and we ate real whole foods, and I didn't use medication growing up. And so I just knew I had to search elsewhere. And I think that's why I was drawn to working with this wonderful naturopath. And working with her, I said, this is amazing. I want to share this with all my girlfriends. I want to share this with everyone. And she said, well, why don't you become a naturopath? And I said, well, I really like the food aspect. She said, well, why don't you become a nutritionist? So I went back to school to become a nutritionist, firstly to learn for myself, to figure out, what was going on. And then once I started to learn about this powerful connection between what we put in our mouths and how it can affect our health and our brain chemistry and everything, I thought, no, I've got to share this bigger and further afield. And then I eventually got out of my computer job and became a nutritionist and wrote my book. And now I just want to share it with the world because it is so powerful.
It is so powerful. And all of those things that you were mentioning, I'm sure so many people listening can really relate, right? That we as women are often pushing ourselves really hard and not necessarily listening to the signals that our body is sending, even though we might want to see a symptom as an opportunity to be in dialogue with and to be in sort of a respectful dialogue with our bodies. So often we feel like we don't have the right to do that, and that we'll just kind of keep soldiering on doing our thing until something really breaks. And so this is really I'm really hoping that already, if you're feeling anxious out there and you're listening to this show, that you don't have to wait for the panic attacks. You don't have to wait for something to get to the point where you literally can't think. You're allowed to take action now, and you're allowed to do it in small steps, hopefully with things that you'll learn today. So you said a couple things there that I just wanted to quickly follow up on. You said you were a vegetarian and that wasn't so great for you. And I know that it's certainly listeners of this show are going to be familiar with the idea that not one right diet is right for everyone, and that bioindividuality is real, as that's something that we look through that lens from a Chinese medicine perspective and an Ayurvedic perspective and a functional medicine perspective. But what was it for you that you felt like you were missing, or that you suspected you might have been missing eating vegetarian?
I came from South Africa and we moved to the US. And what was available in the US in terms of vegetarian food was very different to what I would have eaten had I been in South Africa, because there was all this processed vegetarian food. So there was processed soy,
Fake meat products.
exactly, tofurkey,
Mhm.
soy cheese, soy yogurt, soy milk, and I wasn't at the time, I was not aware of the whole GMO issue with soy. So I was consuming copious amounts of processed soy products. And that did a number on my digestive system. And who knows what the GMOs did, genetically modified organisms, and the effects that it had. It was one of the factors that definitely contributed. And since then, I have discovered that eating quality animal protein definitely seems to help with mental health. And there's research supporting this. Dr. Felice Jacker, she's a researcher in Australia, and she's published a number of papers that fall under the umbrella of this term called nutritional psychiatry and how food can impact your mental health. And one of her first papers was looking at the risk of anxiety and depression in women in Australia, and found that there was a lower risk of anxiety and depression when they consumed real whole foods, and that did include grass-fed red meat. And she was very surprised at the outcome. She went into it was her PhD thesis, and she was assuming that she was going to find that red meat was not a good thing, and was very surprised to see that red meat was beneficial, and specifically for women, that small amounts, and this is not huge, giant portions. This is like a 4-ounce serving, like the palm-sized kind of portion of red meat was beneficial for women. And I have found since going through my journey and working with thousands of women that quality animal protein does seem to help, certainly with preventing anxiety and depression and recovering from anxiety and depression. And the red meat's got zinc, and it's got iron, and it's got omega-3s. It's got the amino acids that are needed to make our neurotransmitters. It helps with blood sugar stability. I'm not saying that you can't be a vegetarian, but if you are vegetarian, you've got to be very careful to make sure that you're getting all of those nutrients. And I didn't mention
Yes.
B12 as well. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, from a Chinese medicine perspective, we would look at the fact that women, because of menstruation, are more likely to be deficient in blood, and red meat is a blood building food. You can certainly build blood with other protein sources and red foods and beets and berries and things like that, and good quality legumes, things like that. But meat is a powerful blood builder. And so if you're suffering from anxiety due to blood deficiency, where kind of that comes with kind of a sense of insecurity or a sense of insufficiency in yourself, that you might be one of those people that benefits from adding grass-fed beef in small amounts as medicine. Whereas from a Chinese medicine perspective, if you're someone whose anxiety is like you're already hot, maybe you're menopausal, maybe you have too much pressure on yourself, and you're like that, if the signs are pointing to heat, then that same food that could be medicine for someone who's blood deficient might actually make things worse for you if you already have a liver that is congested and slowed down and creating some internal heat for you. So anyway, again, not one of those, not to pick on vegetarians or to say that they're doing anything wrong necessarily, but just, or even that it's a one size fits all thing. But it just, I find it fascinating to think about the why that might be based on my framework. So just as in Chinese medicine, anxiety might be heart fire, it might be liver qi heating up and overacting on the heart, it might be blood deficiency, it might be all these different things. In functional medicine and in thinking about amino acids in particular, there are different types that show up differently. And so I'd love to unpack a little bit about the differences between the low serotonin type and the low GABA types of anxiety.
Yes. So with low serotonin, it's the worry in the head, the ruminating thoughts, the negative self-talk, the second guessing. Often women will relate to the term imposter syndrome, where they're feeling like they're going to be caught out. Someone's going to say, well, who are you to be doing this? With low serotonin, we can also have sleep issues. And this could be problems falling asleep, problems staying asleep. And then with each of the neurotransmitter deficiencies, there's a cravings aspect. So with low serotonin, it's the afternoon and the evening cravings. We also see PMS, irritability, OCD type symptoms, or obsessive thinking about certain things. And we often think of low serotonin as being a depression type of thing, but there is this anxiety aspect that goes with the low serotonin, and this is the worry, more the worry kind of feeling. With low GABA, it's different. It's more of a physical kind of anxiety. So you'll feel stiff and tense. You'll feel it in your shoulders. If I'm sitting opposite someone, I'll see them sitting with their sort of shoulders up, around their ears because they've got this physical tension. They may have tension in their back, in their gut. You may feel that sort of feeling in the pit of your stomach. And with the low GABA kind of cravings, it can show up as craving for carbohydrates in order to relax, or more frequently, we'll see cravings for alcohol in order to relax. So at the end of the day, someone may feel like they've got to have a glass of wine. That may end up being 2, 3, 4 glasses of wine. If they're out socializing and they have the low GABA type of anxiety, they will use alcohol in order to relax and mingle and be able to fit in. So very, very different, but you could have both. You could have both the low serotonin and the low GABA anxiety and other types of anxiety at the same time.
This episode is brought to you by Level Up Your Life, my self-care support group or boot camp for creating the habits that we all need to thrive. But don't take my word for it. Here's what real-life Level Up graduates have to say.
The Level Up course truly transformed my life. I'm healthier, happier, more alive, and I love this new me.
Anyone struggling to put their needs first would benefit from working with Brody. Her coaching style is adaptive, from gentle support to calling you out when necessary.
Doing this work of habit change with a supportive coach and a network of allies allowed the foundation of my daily habits to automate. I'm now free to move through the world with greater ease and to focus my energy on what matters most.
If you're looking for a supportive group that fosters self-compassion as one of the utmost practices so that you can realize the transformations you're looking for in your body and your mind and your spirit, with a mentor and a guide who not only has a wicked amount of knowledge, but it is applied and she intimately shares from her own personal experiences of transformation, and you want to just be loved, come on in.
You can get in on this too. Head to brodywelch.com, go to the Level Up page, and apply to join our next round, which launches in January 2020. Oh, I'm so struck by the correlation with Chinese medicine here, because in the serotonin type, the ruminating thoughts and worry and negative self-talk, all of those things, we associate the mind with the spleen, and the spleen is what builds the blood. And so if the spleen is deficient, we might there's going to be a tendency towards worry, right? That worry is the emotion that relates to the spleen as well. And there is likely anxiety, there is likely, and the taste that goes along with the spleen is sweet. And so and again, the peak time of the spleen and stomach is going to be 7 to 11 in the morning, which means it's going to be most deficient 7 to 11 at night. So that sweet craving that worse in the evening so much of that points to working with the spleen from a Chinese medicine perspective and working with the serotonin, whereas the GABA being stiff and tight with the back pain and really needing, wanting alcohol to help let go and relax. To me, that speaks to liver qi stagnation. Liver is supposed to be allowing the free flow of energy in the body and allowing, and its partner, the gallbladder channel, runs right through that neck shoulder area. And so that idea of being, the archetype for it is that it's supposed to be like supple bamboo. So when we're too stiff and too tight in the body, we're not flexible enough, we can be kind of controlling, like it has to be a certain way or I'm not going to be okay. And so that wanting alcohol to physically help us relax and let go of the nervous system, that in fact, GABA could be a better substitute. That's so interesting.
It is. It's so interesting that you're tying it back to the spleen and the low serotonin and then the GABA and the gallbladder liver. That's so interesting.
Well, and the fact that we see those patterns together all the time, right? We see someone who's stressed out and who's constantly compressed for time and maybe has trouble relaxing, who also is dealing with digestive issues, which is spleen's main job is digestion of food and the transformation of food into usable nutrition and transportation of that nutrition everywhere that it needs to go in the body. And it builds the blood and it builds the qi. So it's a very common pattern that we see together. And so yes, not necessarily just an either or situation. And so there are these neurotransmitters that help us relax, like the serotonin and the GABA. And yet there's this whole idea that what we're putting into our mouths and digesting, running through our digestive tract, has something to do with it as well. So I'd love to hear more about gut health and the connection there.
Well, we make so much serotonin in the gut. You'll hear how 95% of serotonin is actually made in the gut. And when we think of the neurotransmitters, we often think of the brain, but we've got this bidirectional link between the gut and the brain. So what happens in the gut has a direct impact on the brain, and then our thinking and our worrying can then in turn have an impact on the gut and can affect our digestion. So we've got this two-way connection that is very much interrelated, and has this effect in both directions. And we know that supporting serotonin, for example, impacts our motility, so thereby it affects our digestion. GABA, for example, can help with visceral pain in the gut. So there we've got that connection between GABA being calming and also helping with pain in the gut. There was a study actually done with a burning mouth syndrome, and GABA helps with burning mouth syndrome. So when we think about the gut, we've got to think about from our mouth all the way down to our anus. So anywhere in that area is digestive system. So it's very interesting to see these connections between the brain and the gut, and how getting our digestion improved. You mentioned the liver having good gallbladder, having good bile produced by the liver, and then having a gallbladder for starters. So many people have their gallbladder removed, but having that gallbladder to store the bile. So when we are needed for digesting fats, it's doing what it needs to do. So, for example, if we've got low hydrochloric acid, we're not going to be able to digest the beautiful grass-fed red meat that we're eating, and then get the benefits of all those nutrients. If we've got low B12, that's going to impact our hydrochloric acid production. So there's so many different factors that we have to look at. And then, of course, the whole fact that we've got these psychobiotics, which are compounds that we can use, as probiotics, which have a direct impact on our mental health. So there's just so many different aspects to it.
And so for people who are thinking, well, I take probiotics, like what should I be looking for if I have anxiety?
Firstly, I would say focus on food first. So getting in fermented foods is beautiful. That's going to, having some sauerkraut, and this has got to be, raw sauerkraut. You can't buy the stuff that's on the shelf that's been, that is not alive and doesn't have all the good bacteria. So making homemade sauerkraut or fermented vegetables is great. Using something like kefir water or other kefir products are great for providing some of that good bacteria. But then there is some research showing that there are specific strains that can help, and it's pretty new in terms of saying take this strain, it's going to have this impact. But we've certainly seen research showing that Lactobacillus rhamnosus has an impact on both GABA receptors and also helps to lower cortisol levels. Lactobacillus bifidus also can increase GABA. There's another one, just Bacillus can increase dopamine, which helps us feel more motivated and gives us energy and focus. So there are some studies that are starting to show that some of these specific strains have direct impacts. I actually had the opportunity to interview Kiran Krishnan for this upcoming summit, and we talked about spore-based probiotics and how they can boost serotonin and GABA. And there's actually a paper that talks about a spore-based probiotics called Bacillus coagulans, which in research shows that it helps with depression and anxiety and irritable bowel syndrome. So I think it's really exciting that we're starting to see this. I think it's early days.
It's so early, yes.
It is.
But which is why I think your recommendation is spot on, that we be eating fermented vegetables, because from the soil, we're getting a diversity of microbes that that probably haven't even been mapped, right? But yet all of them are going to help the diversity of our own internal microbiome and support us in ways that maybe haven't been completely scientifically identified. But we've evolved with these guys, and and so increasing the helpers, even if we don't necessarily know what their role is. A diverse ecosystem is always better than a monoculture, and when it comes to the gut health. And so I think that's all really interesting. I personally had some great results experimenting with probiotics for mood. I think it was that rhamnosus that I tried that really affected. It was much easier for me to relax when I was on that. And I'm someone who has had an undiagnosed gallbladder issue for 20 years before it was removed. And these days I do my best to digest well, taking things to support my liver in bile production. But it had been going on for so long that I think my body just decided to shut off. Like, if there's no bile there to meet it, why have stomach acid? Because we just need to hang on to things. And so my personal struggle with digestion and with the mood and hormone issues that have resulted for me from that have led me to have a keenly personal interest in this issue, and how it really all does tie together. And the healthier our gut, the more emotionally stable and more balanced we feel mentally.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that we don't even know what's out there. We're still learning so much. There's just so much new research in this area. It was a paper that was presented at one of the science conferences. It was about GABA-vorus. And basically this is a bacteria that eats GABA. And it was, it's new. No one really knows about it. And what does that mean? Does that mean if we're taking GABA supplements, is it, eating up the GABA supplements, or is it using up our own GABA levels? We still don't know. So there is so much to learn. The other thing that, going back to sort of, you said, getting this from our diet is getting those prebiotics and getting that fiber, because that's a source of fuel for the short chain fatty acids, which help to make our neurotransmitters as well. So, we've got to just think about, going back to basics and eating real whole food.
Right. Yeah. And really that avoiding the processed stuff, eating food as nature intended, is so powerful for so many things, and often overlooked because it is fairly simple advice. Yes. I think, it's not as sexy as particular strains of probiotics that can help us. You, I know, have been interviewing all sorts of interesting people who are diving deep into the research. And I'm wondering if you could share a few things that have come up in that process that have really caught your attention.
Yes, I had a wonderful interview with Dr. Habib Nawaz on the vagus nerve, and we know how important the vagus nerve is in terms of communication from the gut to the brain. And we talk about various different ways that we can activate the vagus nerve. And one area that I thought was fascinating is he talked about being sociable and how getting out and interacting with people actually has a beneficial impact on the vagus nerve. And I find this very interesting because one area that I work with is social anxiety. And if you have this genetic condition called pyroluria, which is a social anxiety condition, you often don't want to socialize, or you find it really difficult to socialize, and you have to sort of force yourself to get out there. So my thinking is, wow, are all of these people who are not able to socialize or don't do a lot of socializing, what is it doing to their vagus nerve? And in turn, what is that doing to the digestion and their brain health? So if we can use that knowledge to say, well, okay, we really need to be supporting people who have pyroluria nutritionally, and the nutrients are zinc and vitamin B6 and evening primrose oil, and making sure you don't have high copper levels. That's going to then in turn have an impact on your vagus nerve. So I thought that was very interesting. And
yes, the potential for that to be kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you're not inclined to go out, and so you don't go out, so you're not getting that down regulation of the vagus nerve in that way. Yes. For people who might not have ever heard of pyroluria, could you fill out what else that entails apart from the social anxiety? What are its characteristics?
So with pyrolurics, it's this sort of inner tension where you push through and you deal with it. And I have it. I grew up with it, and I sort of, you force yourself to to do things, and you sort of it's like you sort of adapt to the fact that it's uncomfortable to be in social settings, so you sort of push through. But some of the other it was actually something that was identified by Dr. Carl Pfeiffer in the 1970s, and he worked with schizophrenics actually, and he found this cluster of symptoms or characterizations that people with pyroluria had. And the big issue with if you have pyroluria is stressful situations make things a lot worse. So we have with pyrolurics, you end up with being low in zinc and low in vitamin B6. And when you're under a lot of stress, you actually dump higher levels, so then you get worse. So it just becomes this vicious cycle. But the other characteristics are lookalike sisters, and that's because boys are often miscarried. Early morning nausea or not really wanting breakfast in the early morning is a very classic sign of pyroluria. Depression can be common. Joints that pop and ache. And then I've found this connection between introversion and pyroluria. And a lot of people who relate to being an introvert get on the pyroluria protocol and then find that they're no longer introverted. So it's
fascinating.
Very fascinating.
Fascinating how much of our personalities can be altered just by, we truly are ecosystems. So when we're spending time with different people, when we're ingesting different foods, when we're in nature versus the middle of a bustling city, we're going to feel different. And all of these things matter. All of these things move the needle.
They do.
Thank you so much for joining me today and squeezing this interview into your pre-summit schedule. I've personally really appreciated learning from you, and I hope that everyone listening has learned something that they can put into practice.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I love sharing the connections with your expertise with Chinese medicine. I always get to learn when I do these interviews. And today it happened again.
Isn't it fun to talk about people who like to nerd out on their subject? It's one of my favorite things about being a podcast host is getting to learn things from people who are doing great work in the world like you.
Well, thank you.
After recording this interview, I decided to throw my hat into the ring to be an affiliate for Trudy's anti-anxiety gut-brain axis summit that is happening pretty soon here. So if you're interested in registering for the summit, I'd love for you to do so through brodywelch.com, the show notes page. It's totally free if you're listening to it live, but if you're wanting to purchase the interviews so that you can go through all the material later, it's a great way for you to be able to help out this podcast. So make sure you go to brodywelch.com/podcast, go to this episode's show notes page, register for the summit through that link. Again, while the summit is happening, all the information is free, but if you are wanting to make a purchase, it is a way that I will get a little cut of that at no extra cost to you. So thanks in advance. And if you're just looking to get in touch with Trudy, you can head to her website at everywomanover29.com. Links to that will be in the show notes at brodywelch.com as well. And on a final note, if you are struggling with anxiety, just know that I am so with you. I really get how hard it is to live with this condition, as I have gone in and out of anxiety for several years. And just remember that the fastest way to affect your mind is with your breath. And that's always with you, even without changing your diet or balancing neurotransmitters. There's something you can do right now to talk to your nervous system, and that is allowing your breath to get long, slow, deep, easy, and gentle, and allowing yourself the space and time to pause throughout your day to get back in touch with your breath. And you are worth taking care of. Thanks for listening today. To check out the show notes, get on my email list, or drop me a line, head to brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH. I'd love to hear from you. If you learned something new or feel inspired to try something different in your life, I'd love for you to pay it forward by sharing this episode with a friend who you think could also benefit, and give them a reason to listen. You'll be helping to create a world where we encourage each other to embody self-respect. Till next time, be good to yourself.